The morning of the charity chess tournament dawned bright and clear, with autumn sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the Riverside Country Club. Margaret had borrowed a car from her neighbor and arrived early with Marcus, who wore his best clothes, a pressed white shirt, dark pants, and the one tie he owned for special occasions. Despite their modest appearance, Marcus carried himself with quiet confidence as they walked through the elegant entrance. The tournament hall buzzed with activity as participants checked in and examined the tournament pairings posted on a large bulletin board. Most players were middle-aged businessmen in expensive suits, with a few younger adults and several teenagers from local private schools. Marcus was clearly the youngest participant, and his presence drew curious glances from other competitors. Richard Pemberton stood near the registration table, greeting donors and participants with his usual charm and authority. He wore an immaculate navy blazer with the country club emblem and looked every inch the successful businessman hosting a charitable event. When he spotted Marcus and Margaret entering the hall, he excused himself from a conversation with potential investors and walked over to meet them. Marcus. Margaret, welcome to the tournament, Richard said, his tone more respectful than it had been during their first encounter. Marcus, you're registered as board number 12 for the first round. Your opponent will be Dr. James Mitchell, a retired college professor who's been playing chess for about 20 years. Marcus nodded politely, scanning the room to observe his competition. His analytical mind was already working, noting the confident postures and casual chess discussions that indicated most participants were experienced players comfortable in competitive settings. Sir, Marcus asked quietly, what should I expect from the time controls? I've mostly played faster games online. Each player gets 90 minutes for the entire game, plus a 30-second increment per move, Richard explained. These will be longer, more strategic games than you might be used to. The key is managing your time wisely while calculating accurately. Dr. Mitchell approached their group, having spotted Richard talking with unfamiliar faces. A distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to intellectual discussions and academic debates. His chess rating of 1650 made him a solid amateur player, though not quite expert level. Richard, I see you found some new blood for our tournament, Dr. Mitchell said with a warm smile. I'm James Mitchell, and I believe I have the pleasure of playing against this young man in round one. Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand with mature politeness. Marcus Washington, sir. I'm honored to play against you. Dr. Mitchell shook Marcus's hand, impressed by the boy's confident demeanor and respectful manner. Wonderful. How long have you been playing chess, Marcus? About 7 months, sir. Dr. Mitchell's eyebrows rose with surprise. 7 months? That's quite ambitious, entering a tournament with such limited experience. Well, I'll try not to be too hard on you. Chess tournaments can be intimidating for newcomers. Margaret felt the familiar sting of underestimation, but she noticed that Marcus simply smiled and thanked Dr. Mitchell for his consideration. Her son had learned to let his performance speak for itself, rather than argue about his abilities beforehand. As the first round began, the tournament hall settled into focused quiet, broken only by the soft clicking of chess pieces and occasional whispered conversations between spectators. Margaret found a seat where she could observe Marcus's game while Richard positioned himself nearby, curious to see how the boy would handle tournament pressure. Dr. Mitchell had chosen white pieces and opened with a standard move, clearly intending to play a solid, positional game that would test Marcus's understanding of chess fundamentals. Marcus responded with equal precision, developing his pieces harmoniously while maintaining flexible pawn structures for the first 20 moves. The game proceeded along classical lines with both players, demonstrating sound opening knowledge. Dr. Mitchell was pleasantly surprised by Marcus's understanding of basic principles. The boy was clearly not a beginner, who had simply memorized a few tactical tricks, however. As the game entered the middle game phase, Dr. Mitchell began to realize he was facing something extraordinary. Marcus's moves became increasingly sophisticated, finding subtle improvements that gradually accumulated into a significant positional advantage. The boy was not only playing good moves, but finding the best moves in complex positions. Interesting choice, Dr. Mitchell murmured as Marcus repositioned a knight to a seemingly quiet square that actually controlled multiple key points on the board. Marcus looked up briefly. Thank you, sir. I'm trying to improve my worst-placed piece while maintaining pressure in the center. The comment revealed understanding that impressed Dr. Mitchell greatly. Marcus was not just making instinctive moves, but was consciously applying advanced strategic principles. This level of chess thinking typically took years to develop. By move 30, word had begun to spread through the tournament hall that something unusual was happening at board 12. Richard had been discreetly monitoring the game and realized that Marcus was not only holding his own, but was actually outplaying his experienced opponent. Other participants began gathering around the game during their own breaks, drawn by curiosity about the young player who was creating complications. For a respected local chess veteran, Dr. Mitchell found himself in serious trouble as he struggled to find adequate responses to Marcus's increasing pressure. The boy had created multiple weaknesses in the doctor's position while maintaining perfect piece coordination. Even more impressively, Marcus was managing his time efficiently, using his minutes wisely while maintaining the quality of his play. "Excuse me," whispered Tom Bradley, a local business owner with a rating of 1750, to Richard. "Who is this kid?" "He's playing moves that I wouldn't even consider." Richard watched Marcus calmly calculate a complex tactical sequence before making a move that won material by force. "His name is Marcus Washington. He's been playing for 7 months. Tom's jaw dropped. 7 months? That's impossible. Look at this position. He's conducting a masterpiece against Dr. Mitchell. I've never beaten Jim this convincingly. And I've been playing for 15 years. The growing crowd around board 12 created a buzz of excitement that spread throughout the tournament hall. Participants finished their own games quickly, eager to observe the unprecedented situation of a 12-year-old systematically dismantling one of the tournament's most respected players. Dr. Mitchell, despite his deteriorating position, found himself genuinely enjoying the game. Years of playing against the same local opponents had become somewhat predictable, but Marcus was showing him chess ideas that were completely fresh and original. Even facing defeat, the doctor appreciated the educational value of playing against such an exceptional young talent. Marcus's final combination was breathtaking in its simplicity and power. With a quiet move that appeared harmless, he set up multiple threats that Dr. Mitchell could not simultaneously defend. The retired professor studied the position for several minutes before extending his hand in resignation. "Magnificent game, young man," Dr. Mitchell said with genuine admiration. "In 40 years of tournament play, I've rarely encountered such mature chess understanding. You have a remarkable gift." The applause from the gathered spectators was spontaneous and enthusiastic. Marcus stood and shook Dr. Mitchell's hand respectfully, thanking him for an instructive game and complimenting his opponent's fighting spirit. The boy's gracious behavior and victory impressed the crowd. As much as his chess abilities, Richard felt an unexpected sense of pride watching Marcus handle his victory with such maturity. The boy could have been arrogant or boastful after such an impressive win, but instead he remained humble and respectful toward his opponent. As the second round began, Marcus's reputation had spread throughout the tournament. His opponent, Sarah Chun, was a high school senior with a rating of 1580 who had won several scholastic tournaments. She approached the game with serious preparation, having witnessed Marcus's first-round victory and understanding that she faced a formidable opponent. The second game demonstrated different aspects of Marcus's chess strength. Where his first game had showcased positional understanding, this contest revealed his tactical brilliance. Against Sarah's aggressive attacking style, Marcus defended with precision while creating counter-threats that kept the position balanced and complex. Margaret watched nervously as the game reached a critical moment, where both players had dangerous attacks against the opposing king. This type of sharp, tactical position was exactly where inexperienced players typically made fatal errors under time pressure. Marcus handled the crisis with calm calculation, finding a defensive move that neutralized Sarah's attack while maintaining his own threats. His time management remained excellent, allowing him to calculate accurately in the complex position while keeping enough time for the endgame. When Sarah made a subtle but decisive error in the time scramble, Marcus punished it immediately with a forcing sequence that won material and simplified to a clearly winning endgame. Sarah resigned gracefully, praising Marcus's defensive skills and wishing him luck in the remaining row. The silence in Richard's study grew heavy as both players contemplated the board. 25 moves had passed, and what Richard had expected to be a quick, easy victory over an amusing child had transformed into the most challenging chess game he had faced in years. Marcus sat quietly across from him, occasionally glancing up with polite attention when Richard cleared his throat or shifted in his chair, but mostly maintaining his focus on the 64 squares before them. Richard studied the position with growing alarm. Marcus had not only equalized the game, but had gradually built a winning advantage. The boys' pieces worked together with mathematical precision, controlling key squares and creating multiple threats simultaneously. Richard's king was under pressure, his pieces were poorly coordinated, and every move seemed to make his position worse. What disturbed Richard most was not just that he was losing, but how he was losing. Marcus played with the calm patience of a master, never rushing his moves or showing excitement when he gained an advantage. Instead, the boy methodically improved his position, found the best squares for his pieces, and created problems that Richard struggled to solve. "Your move, sir?" Marcus said softly. Breaking Richard from his troubled thoughts, Richard looked at the board again, hoping he had missed something that might save his position. He hadn't. Marcus's last move had been a quiet but devastating advance of a pawn that created multiple threats. If Richard defended against one threat, another would become unstoppable. It was the kind of move that demonstrated deep chess understanding, not flashy or dramatic, but impossibly effective. "Where did you say you learned to play?" Richard asked, stalling for time while he searched for any possible defense. "My mom brought home a chess set that was being thrown away, sir. I taught myself from library books and studied games online at the community center." Marcus replied honestly. The answer made Richard's situation even more humiliating. This child had become a formidable chess player using discarded materials and free resources, while Richard had enjoyed every advantage: expensive lessons, top-quality equipment, prestigious chess clubs, and decades of regular practice with strong opponents. Richard finally made his move, a desperate attempt to create complications that might confuse the young player. But Marcus responded immediately, as if he had anticipated this exact continuation. The boy's move was simple and strong. Maintaining his advantage while eliminating Richard's counterplay, Margaret watched from her position near the door, feeling a mixture of pride and concern. She was amazed by her son's performance but worried about how Richard would react to being outplayed so thoroughly. She had worked for wealthy families long enough to understand that men like Richard did not handle humiliation well, especially when it came from someone they considered inferior. As the game continued, Richard's moves became increasingly desperate. He sacrificed a piece hoping to create an attack against Marcus's king, but the boy defended calmly and accurately, neutralizing all threats while maintaining his material advantage. Marcus handled the complications with mature composure, calculating variations with impressive accuracy for someone his age. "Excellent defense," Richard muttered, unable to hide his frustration. He had expected his sacrifice to create confusion that might allow him to salvage the game, but Marcus had seen through all his tactics. "Thank you, sir," Marcus replied politely. "You're putting a lot of pressure on my king. I have to be careful." The boy's humble response was somehow more irritating to Richard than arrogance would have been. Marcus was not gloating or showing off despite holding a completely winning position. Instead, he continued to treat Richard with respectful deference, acknowledging his opponent's efforts even while systematically dismantling his position. 10 moves later, the inevitable became clear to both players. Richard's position was hopeless. His pieces were trapped, His king was vulnerable, and Marcus had multiple ways to force checkmate within the next few moves. Richard stared at the board. His face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Marcus looked up from the board with genuine concern. "Are you feeling all right, sir? Would you like to take a break?" The kindness in the boy's voice was the final straw for Richard's damaged pride. Here was a child who had just systematically destroyed him in chess. And instead of celebrating or mocking him, Marcus was showing genuine worry for his well-being. "I'm fine," Richard snapped, then immediately regretted his harsh tone. Even in his humiliation, he recognized that Marcus had done nothing wrong. The boy had simply played excellent chess with perfect sportsmanship. Richard forced himself to study the board one more time, hoping against hope that he had overlooked something. He hadn't. Marcus's next move would begin a force sequence leading to checkmate. And there was absolutely nothing Richard could do to prevent it. "I believe you have checkmate in 4 moves," Richard said quietly. His voice barely above a whisper. Marcus examined the board carefully, not to verify his advantage, but to make sure he agreed with Richard's calculation. After a moment, he nodded. "Yes, sir, that's correct." The admission hung in the air between them. Richard Pemberton, Harvard graduate, country club champion, and self-proclaimed chess expert, had been thoroughly defeated by a 12-year-old boy who had learned the game 6 months ago using a damaged chess set retrieved from the trash. "Would you like me to show you the sequence?" Marcus asked politely. Richard's first instinct was to refuse. The humiliation was already complete. But something in the boy's manner made him reconsider. Marcus wasn't offering to show off his tactical ability. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in sharing his analysis, treating Richard as a fellow chess enthusiast rather than a defeated opponent. "Yes," Richard said finally. "Show me." Marcus leaned forward and began demonstrating the checkmate sequence, moving pieces with careful precision while explaining his reasoning. "If I move my queen here, you have to block with your bishop. Then my rook moves to this square, creating a double attack. Your only defense is to move your king here, but then my knight delivers checkmate from this square." Richard followed the analysis, recognizing the beautiful coordination between Marcus's pieces. The checkmate was not just forced but elegant, demonstrating understanding of chess patterns that most amateur players never learned. "That's very impressive," Richard admitted grudgingly. "You see combinations that I missed completely." Marcus smiled modestly. "I've been studying tactical puzzles every day. My mom bought me a book of chess problems from a used bookstore, and I worked through them during lunch at school." The image of Marcus studying chess, puzzles alone during lunch while other children played on the playground, struck Richard unexpectedly. This boy was dedicating himself to intellectual improvement with resources that most people would consider inadequate, yet achieving results that surpassed players with every advantage. Margaret stepped forward slightly. "Marcus, you should thank Mr. Pemberton for taking the time to play with you." "Thank you very much, sir," Marcus said sincerely. "This was the best chess game I've ever played. I learned a lot from watching how you handled the opening. Your piece development was very strong." Richard looked at the boy with new eyes. Even in victory, Marcus was gracious and respectful, finding genuine positives to comment on despite having won decisively. This level of maturity and sportsmanship was rare among adult players, let alone children. "You're welcome," Richard said slowly. An uncomfortable silence followed as Richard struggled with conflicting emotions. His pride was wounded, his assumptions had been shattered, and yet he found himself genuinely impressed by Marcus's abilities and character. "Sir," Marcus said hesitantly, "may I ask you something about the tournament you mentioned?" Richard looked up, surprised by the question. "What about it?" "My mom said it's for charity, to help kids like me. I was wondering, what kind of players usually participate?" Richard had almost forgotten about the tournament in the aftermath of his chess defeat. The event was supposed to feature wealthy donors playing casual games, while raising money for underprivileged youth programs. Most participants would be business associates and country club members who played chess as a social activity rather than a serious competitive pursuit. "Well," Richard said carefully, "it's mostly local business leaders and community members. The chess level varies, but most players are competent amateurs. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Would there be any strong players there? I'd love the chance to play against different styles and learn from more experienced opponents. The irony of the question was not lost on Richard. Marcus was asking for stronger opposition after just defeating someone who considered himself an expert. The boy's hunger for challenging games and continuous improvement was evident in his voice. There might be one or two stronger players, Richard said honestly. Though, after playing you, I'm not sure how many of them would provide the challenge you're looking for. Margaret felt a surge of pride at the subtle compliment hidden in Richard's words. Despite his obvious discomfort at being defeated, he was beginning to acknowledge her son's exceptional abilities. The tournament is next month at the Riverside Country Club, Richard continued. Entry fee is $50 and all proceeds go to the Youth Education Fund. Margaret's heart sank. $50 might seem like a small amount, too. The marble floors of the Pemberton mansion gleamed under the crystal chandelier as Margaret Washington pushed her cleaning cart through the grand hallway. At 52, she had worked as head maid for the Pemberton family for nearly 15 years, maintaining their sprawling estate with quiet dignity and unwavering professionalism. Her movements were efficient and practiced as she dusted the expensive artwork lining the walls. Each piece worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Today was different from her usual routine. Margaret's 12-year-old son Marcus sat in the servants' quarters, finishing his homework at the small wooden table she had set up for him. School was closed for teacher training, and her regular babysitter had fallen ill. Richard Pemberton had reluctantly agreed to let Marcus stay in the house while Margaret worked, with strict instructions that the boy was to remain out of sight and make no noise. Marcus Washington was an unusual child by any measure. While other kids his age were playing video games or watching television, Marcus found himself drawn to puzzles, mathematics, and strategy games. His teachers had noticed his exceptional abilities early on, but the underfunded public school system lacked the resources to fully nurture his gifts. Margaret worked extra hours whenever possible, saving every penny she could to buy educational materials and books for her brilliant son. The boy had discovered chess 6 months earlier when Margaret brought home a damaged chess set she had found in the mansion's donation pile. Richard Pemberton had been clearing out old items from his late father's study and had dismissed the antique wooden chess set as worthless due to a few missing pieces. Margaret had asked permission to take it home, thinking Marcus might enjoy learning the game. She had no idea that this simple act would unlock something extraordinary in her son within weeks. Marcus had not only learned all the rules but had begun developing strategies that amazed anyone who played against him. He devoured every chess book the local library had available and spent hours studying games online at the community center. His young mind seemed to absorb chess knowledge like a sponge, recognizing patterns and combinations that escaped even experienced players. Richard Pemberton descended the main staircase, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble steps. At 45, he had inherited his father's real estate empire and expanded it into a billion-dollar corporation. Tall and imposing, with perfectly groomed silver hair and expensive suits, Richard carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never faced real adversity. His success had made him wealthy beyond measure, but it had also instilled in him a deep sense of superiority over those he considered beneath his social class. As Richard walked toward his study, he noticed Margaret polishing a side table near the hallway entrance. The sight of her reminded him of the charity chess tournament his company was sponsoring next month at the country club. The event would raise money for underprivileged children while allowing Richard to network with other wealthy donors. He had been looking for ways to demonstrate his philanthropy to potential business partners, and this tournament provided the perfect opportunity. "Margaret," he called out, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to immediate attention. Margaret immediately stopped her work and turned toward him. "Yes, Mr. Pemberton? I've been thinking about that chess tournament we're hosting," Richard said, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "We need some local participants to make it look authentic, show that we're really helping the community. Do you know anyone who plays chess? Maybe some of the other staff members have children who could participate." Margaret hesitated for a moment. She knew exactly what Richard was really asking for, tokens to make his charity event appear more legitimate. However, she also saw an opportunity for Marcus. Actually, sir, my son Marcus has recently learned to play chess. He's become quite good at it. Richard's eyebrows rose with amused surprise. Your son? How old is he? 12, sir. 12? Richard chuckled, a sound that contained more condescension than humor. Well, I suppose even children can learn to move the pieces around. Though, I have to warn you, this tournament will feature some very serious players. I've been playing chess since I was at Harvard, and I've won several tournaments at the country club. The other participants will likely be experienced adult players. Margaret felt a flash of protective anger but maintained her professional composure. Marcus is quite gifted, Mr. Pemberton. His teachers say he has exceptional abilities. Richard's smile grew wider and not in a kind way. I'm sure he's very bright for his background. Tell you what, why don't I play a game with the boy myself? Consider it a practice session before the real tournament. It might help him understand what he's up against when he faces actual skilled players. The suggestion hit Margaret like a physical blow. She recognized the mockery hidden beneath Richard's polite words, the assumption that her son could never seriously compete against someone of Richard's supposed caliber. But she also knew Marcus better than anyone, and she had seen what he could do with 64 squares and 32 pieces. That's very generous of you, sir, Margaret replied carefully. I'm sure Marcus would be honored to play against you. Excellent, Richard clapped his hands together. Bring the boy to my study in, say, 20 minutes. I'll set up the chessboard. This should be entertaining. Educational for him. As Richard walked toward his study, Margaret stood, frozen in the hallway, her cleaning cloth still clutched in her hand. She knew she had just accepted a challenge that would either showcase her son's incredible abilities or expose him to humiliation from a man who already looked down on them both. But she also knew Marcus, and she believed in him completely. Margaret quietly made her way to the servants' quarters, where Marcus was bent over his mathematics homework, pencil moving quickly across the page as he solved problems that would challenge high school students. His concentration was absolute, a trait that served him well in both academics and chess. Marcus, Margaret said softly, not wanting to startle him. Marcus looked up, his intelligent brown eyes focusing on his mother's face. He immediately noticed the tension in her expression. What's wrong, Mom? Margaret sat down across from her son at the small table. Mr. Pemberton has invited you to play chess with him in his study. Marcus's eyes lit up with excitement. Really? That's great. I've been wanting to play against someone new. Margaret reached across the table and took her son's hands in hers. Marcus, I need you to understand something. Mr. Pemberton isn't inviting you to play because he respects your abilities. He's doing this because he thinks it will be easy for him to beat you. He thinks you're just a child who happens to know how the pieces move. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Despite his young age, he had already encountered enough subtle prejudice to understand what his mother meant. He doesn't think someone like me could be good at chess? That's right, Margaret said honestly. He sees where we come from, and he makes assumptions about what we're capable of. Marcus straightened in his chair, and Margaret saw a familiar spark in his eyes, the same determination that drove him to master difficult concepts and solve complex problems. Then I guess I'll have to show him what I'm really capable of. Margaret smiled, feeling a surge of pride in her remarkable son. Just remember, win or lose, you're brilliant and talented and worthy of respect. Don't let him make you feel small, no matter what happens. Marcus nodded seriously. I won't, Mom, but I don't think he's going to be as good as he thinks he is. 20 minutes later, Margaret knocked on the door to Richard's study. The room was a monument to wealth and prestige, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, an enormous mahogany desk, and oil paintings of Richard's ancestors covering the walls. In the center of the room sat a small table with an expensive marble chess set, each piece crafted with intricate detail. Come in, Richard called out from behind his desk. Margaret entered with Marcus beside her. The boy looked small in the vast room, but his posture was straight and confident. He surveyed the luxurious surroundings with curiosity rather than intimidation. His gaze eventually settling on the chess set. Richard looked up from some papers. He was reviewing and studied Marcus with barely concealed amusement. The boy was neatly dressed in clean but obviously inexpensive clothes, his sneakers showing signs of wear despite being carefully maintained. To Richard, Marcus looked exactly like what he expected, a poor child who was probably excited just to be in such a fancy room. "So this is the chess prodigy," Richard said with a patronizing smile. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Washington, sir," the boy replied politely. "Well, Marcus, I hope you're ready for a real chess game. This isn't like playing with your friends at school." Richard gestured toward the chess set. "That board belonged to my grandfather, who was quite the player himself. The pieces are carved from genuine marble and onyx. Probably worth more than, well, quite valuable." Marcus approached the board and examined the pieces with genuine appreciation. "They're beautiful, sir. The craftsmanship is excellent." Richard was slightly surprised by the boy's articulate response but dismissed it as politeness taught by his mother. "Yes, well, let's get started." "I'll give you white, that's the tradity."